Jai Baba, everyone. Inscribe these words in your heart. Nothing is real but God. Nothing matters but love for God. When we experience the amount of activity that goes on, not only here, but every place, it's sometimes the most difficult thing in the world to realize and remember and act on a very supreme and simple fact. And that fact is as we learned from Baba, that the vast creation that consists of such bigness that no mind can comprehend it. We're on a little planet. Our whole world and everything that occupies our minds is centered on our existence on this little planet. And from Baba we learn that even though creation is so vast that we're dealing with billions of galaxies separated by trillions of light years, terms that have absolutely no meaning, and that we, as single human beings, are so tiny that we are bound to feel as though we are absolutely lost. And yet, look what we have now become very clear about. We have learned through the most recent appearance of God on earth that it took all of this vast creation that cannot be comprehended to produce the single, small, tiny, fragile human being. Because in that tiny human being, God is finally consciously experienced. The purpose of creation is realized in the human being. So that's why we're here on this planet. All sorts of things go on, all sorts of goals are set up as being worthwhile, and yet we are here to experience God. So what do we do about it? One of the things that we've learned from Baba is that there is no such thing as happiness until we do the kind of work that will result in our feeling the inner presence of God. The only way that God can be experienced is through the God-man. We've all had the good fortune to have conviction that God exists through the appearance of the God-man on earth. Before I first heard about Baba, I knew there was meaning in life because I began to find evidence of it within myself. And then when I began to find evidence of it within myself, I began to discover that meaning has always been in this world, and that the highest values had to do with the quality of life. The quality of life required that an individual forget himself. In making the effort to forget yourself, you find out that most of your thinking, most of your actions, most of your words are related to concern about yourself. And that being the case, you find out that it seems to be an impossibility to forget yourself and to have any other motive than self-gratification as a reason for living. When I first saw Baba in New York in 1956, it was at the Hotel Delmonico. My wife and I had driven up to New York, and when we got there, she had the instructions from her mother to go shopping and buy a dress for her brother's engagement party. So she dropped me off at the Hotel Delmonico on Park Avenue, and I was going to run up and see God while she went shopping for a dress. I got up to the floor where everyone expecting to see Baba met, and everyone's name was taken down so that those who were in charge of this gathering would be sure that no one was overlooked. So my name was added to the list, and at the appropriate time, my name was called, and I went in to see Baba. When I went in to see him, when I walked through the door and saw him sitting on a chaise lounge, my first impression was that there wasn't anyone more familiar to me than Baba. Later, I began to think about what that feeling meant, what it amounted to. And what it amounted to was that I would not have hesitated to say to him things about myself that I would not reveal to anyone else. So he was the most familiar person to me. Growing up as a child, I always used to have as a concern how much people would put up with me if I were to say things that they didn't like. And I always felt as though I had to dare them. I had to risk the anger of other people, because I felt that unless I did that, I did not feel any security simply by not saying something and therefore being accepted. So consequently, this was always in the front of my mind. When I saw Baba for the first time, I had the experience of meeting someone who accepted me totally no matter what I did. So that's what I meant by his being the most familiar person to me. I'm having a little difficulty really getting my thoughts organized, so if you will allow me, I do have a number of writings. My writings are my communication with Baba. It's a very intimate thing. It's like Baba talking to me. So I might try to perhaps get into the rhythm of this, which I'm not feeling at the present time, by sharing with you some of the things that I had written when I was feeling very close to Baba. Accomplishments are nothing until one can put God before everything else. If one is serious about putting God first, then one will successfully accomplish the only thing worth accomplishing, and that is to become more spiritually aware of one's own purpose for existence. To love God fully and completely is the only work. And to love God above all else is the only reason for creation. Without God, there is no creation. So do your best. When I say you, I'm referring to me. So do your best not to be angry with this or that, or this one and that one. Disappointments are natural, but anger poisons the mind. Keep your minds and hearts filled. Keep your minds and hearts filled with thoughts of Baba, leaving no room for anger. And remember, all is in Baba's hands. This second one was for the purpose of providing a daily guide that applies to everyone. All experiences, whether good or bad, must be given to Baba immediately and must be immediately forgotten. If this can be done quickly, Baba will use the experiences to help the lover onto the path. If the lover reacts in any way to the experiences, whether good or bad, new karma is created and must be dealt with, thus slowing down the progress of the lover. Attitude sets off electrical impulses. Positive attitude gives off strong impulses that carry a stronger force of energy. Negative attitude gives off weaker impulses that carry a weaker force of energy. This throws the body into an emergency state. This emergency state is the breeding ground for illnesses. Add worry, frustration, anger, poor diet, little rest, and you will experience serious health problems. So with or without any healthful remedies, attitude is the single most important ingredient for good health. This is also true in Baba's work. Even when Baba lovers experience health problems, their work for Baba can continue through a positive attitude. Baba lovers must accept Baba's will by remaining positive at all times. That is also Baba's work. The ego still wants what illusion can give. The ego is alive until it starves from lack of attention. It is the final thread that keeps you tied to illusion. And obedience is the only means to starve the ego. You must continue to struggle to obey in spite of all problems and difficulties. Contentment will come through obedience. This happens, that happens, this is a problem, that is a problem, and then more happens. And then there are more problems. When you are walking in a dense forest, and there is only one very thin trail, and you are locked into this trail because of thick undergrowth, and you notice a very wide tree is falling on this very thin trail with no escape, what do? You take Baba's name. There is nothing else you can do. Every single frustration, every single problem is that tree. Now, if you were to call on Baba with the same intensity each time you face a problem, or even a frustration, all your problems and frustrations would be resolved as Baba's will and as Baba's work through you and for all. And for all who come into your orbit. There is no other approach. There is no other way. There is only Baba. Baba is God. Man is the image of God. God looks into a mirror. The mirror is creation. God sees himself as all of creation. The mirror reflects the whim of the unconscious God. The conscious God steps into the mirror and becomes the God-man. His love for his own creation draws him into the illusion he has created, but as the conscious God. But as the conscious God, he alone experiences himself as the real God standing before the mirror. So when Baba tells you, love me, obey me, surrender to my will, leave all results to me, think of me at all times, see me above all else, feel my love for you, hold on to my Dharman. Baba is telling you, us, to affix yourself to him so tightly through your love for him that when he finally steps out of creation, you will be carried out in the loving arms of the avatar that you, in your great love for him, put before all else. It is the nature of God to give. It is the nature of man to want. The struggle for man is to want the only thing that is worth wanting and the only thing that is real. God cannot refuse man, but man continuously refuses God's gift of love. Therein lies the pain and suffering of man's search for happiness. When man looks within himself for answers to his pain and suffering, God immediately gives him a spark of real love. When man's direction changes from within, the path to love begins to form directly under his feet, and no matter how dimly lit, each step is stronger than the one before. And with each step, the light becomes brighter. Many times man gives up. Many times man leaves that rocky road. Many times man closes his eyes to that tiny spark. But God's vision of man never stops, and God's love for man never diminishes, and God's hold on man never weakens. So with divine authority, Baba tells us on this special day, do not fear God. Fear only yourself when you are not loving God 100%. Zero. All right, so where we are at this time in our journey to Baba is to try to understand what it is we must do in order to experience him where he really exists, which is within ourselves. This is the only work that I try to do, and what I try to tell other people when I'm asked to tell other people something is to relate to them what I have struggled to learn myself about my journey to Baba. The only relief I get is to think about Baba. I am not interested in most things. I am interested in doing work when I can be somewhat creative. But most of the time, the only thing that really gives me pleasure when I'm not actually working is to put my mind on Baba. Now, what I think it is necessary for all of us to bear in mind is that we have the responsibility as the family of the God-man, and by that I simply mean you are in his family. If you are convinced that he is God, you are in his family. That conviction has been a rare, rare privilege that's confined to very few people on the face of this earth. That conviction is the key that will enable you to accomplish what Baba wants us to accomplish right now. What he wants us to accomplish is to make our lives his message of love and truth. And the paradox is that all of us want to be happy, and there is no possibility of happiness unless you feel Baba within. It is impossible to feel Baba within unless you remember him. Everything that makes you think of Baba is a good thing. Everything that has been written about Baba, everything that Baba has related that has been put down, revealing whatever he has revealed about the purpose of life and our intimate connection with it. All of those things serve only one purpose, and that purpose is to make you think about the physical appearance of God. When I say Baba, I am always I always mean God. Baba means God. If you have a better definition for God than Baba, then use that. God in human form has to have our attention. But God in human form must become so intimate in terms of your finding in him what you most deeply long for. What you really long for is happiness. Not relative happiness, real happiness. Not happiness that can be taken away from you by someone or given to you by someone. The happiness must be self-grounded. It must be a joy that wells up from within, regardless of circumstances. Because Baba is God in human form, this means that everyone who is conscious of him is the life of each one that is conscious of Baba in human form and is convinced that he is God, is controlled by Baba. By that, I mean that every moment, everything that happens to each one of us is his will. It's as though Baba would say to us, and I mean this literally, whatever happens to you, Baba would say, is my will. How you take it is your will. In that sentence, I am summing up the entire effort that we are required to make if we are to make Baba our constant companion. Because whatever it is that happens at this moment, from this moment on, past moments, but we're concerned about this moment forward, is Baba's will. Baba places in the path of each one of us those experiences that are necessary for each one of us to do the work to put him first. Our responsibility is that no matter what happens to us every day from moment to moment, the work that we have to do is to put Baba first. When we put Baba first, then what is happening, what is supposed to happen, is that putting Baba first means that he represents the highest purpose of existence. We are conscious of that. We're aware of that. And if something disagreeable happens, Baba has placed that in our path. The requirement of facing something disagreeable is to work to feel differently. We don't want to feel negative. So by putting Baba first, we're doing the work to try to realize that this pressure that we're experiencing is the opportunity to focus on Baba more. So gradually what happens is that the more you think about Baba, every moment that you can, then when pressures come along and they are unpleasant, consequently you have a negative response to them, you try to do Baba work. The Baba work of putting Baba first is to change a negative feeling into a positive one. That's all the work that is required. Since everything that happens to us is Baba's will, then our will is to take it and surrender to Baba's will. In 1958, when Baba was at Myrtle Beach, when I went there with my wife, I had the earlier experience of having received a number of letters from Baba, having written to Baba a number of times, having received some cables from Baba. Baba was the most important event in my life, so when I went down to Myrtle Beach, that was uppermost in my mind. But when I got there, there were many people there, and it seemed as though I didn't exist as far as Baba was concerned, because he was seeing everyone except me. Well, that was a very hard thing for me to handle, because he was the most important, the only important event of my life. So I had to deal with that kind of a critical issue in my life, conflict. The one that was most important in creation, and the one that was the most important person in creation for me, paid no attention to me. The only way I could resolve that was by coming to the realization, and I didn't come to it except through a great deal of inner pain. I came to the realization that since he was God, whatever he wanted should be what I want. He did not want to see me. When I came to that realization, I really didn't want to see him. And I was absolutely thrilled that I was making his will my will. And I had an experience at that time that I don't know that I had one, well, it hasn't been equaled on many occasions since then. But just the fact of surrendering to his will, because I really had no choice at that point. But having surrendered to his will, I felt a joy that I didn't think was possible. I didn't care whether he saw me ever again. I was surrendering to God's will. And within minutes he sent for me. Well, that's what we have to try to do all the time. Baba is the intimate companion. If he performs something that we want, it's only to make us make us make a greater effort to want what he wants. You heard the stories of this miracle and this occurrence and that occurrence. These things are very valuable because it helps our limited understanding grasp the fact not only is he God, but what God does, what he's capable of doing, how vast he is, how total he is, and then how intimate he is. The remarkable thing is that the creator of all can be such an intimate companion. What I'm trying to say to you, what I'm trying to find the way to make very real and graspable is how to keep that overwhelmingly magnificent fact of our existence in the front of the mind. Every single moment of the day is the opportunity to do the work that makes Baba increasingly real, more real than what we see around us. The world that we see around us is very solid. But what does its solidness mean? It has no value. In my own particular path to Baba, I've always looked for something of value, something that was worthwhile no matter what went on in the world. Baba is the ultimate value. The physical world, if you owned all of it, and you enjoyed perfect health, and everyone connected with you that you cared about enjoyed perfect health, would not make you happy. Baba tells us in many different ways, God does not punish man. He patiently waits for man to stop punishing himself. What I learned through Baba was I had a birthright to be really happy. I want to be happy without going anywhere, without accomplishing anything in the worldly sense. What I have gained from Baba is the small realization that this is happening. And this is the only thing that I feel I should be struggling to try to tell others about. I do not think of Baba in the past. I got over that shock when Baba dropped his body and we received a cable from Elizabeth Patterson, and I stood in the same spot for God knows how long, feeling that the light of the world had gone out. And I struggled very hard with everything, with all my resources, whatever they might have been, which I really felt were inadequate, to cope with this terrible tragedy. I realized after Baba dropped the body how much more I should have done to find him where he really existed, where Baba said he really existed, within the heart of each one of us. I tried to do that when Baba was in the physical body because those words from him, that we must find him where he really exists, were very important to me. They were very meaningful to me. But after Baba dropped the physical body, I felt I should have made a far greater effort. It was at that time that the words to the song, Begin to Begin, really sprung into life and had such a powerful impact. The words, now when I hear people curse the chance that was wasted, I know but too well what they mean. I realized that I was constantly waiting for Baba to send me something from India, an invitation, a letter, something coming from the family letter, some news, always postponing the inner work. And it's very important that we find the joy of Baba's inner presence. We cannot find it unless we obey him. Obeying him, unfortunately, in a manner of speaking, requires that we meet our responsibilities. But my God, meeting your responsibilities with Baba helping is so vastly different than trying to meet those responsibilities without Baba. And the more you begin to depend on him and do what you're required to do, whatever that might be, the more you're going to find the joy of knowing that you're not alone, no matter what it is. But it's like anything else. You have to start in steps, one step at a time. That path is right beneath your feet. But if your mind is out there somewhere, and this prince is waiting in your heart, while you're traveling here and traveling there, and playing with the worthless trinkets of the material world, what a sad thing. You yourself will come to the conclusion, why have I not done more to keep remembering him? The point of remembering Baba, you see, first of all, you already have the conviction. It doesn't make any difference how weak that conviction is, you already have it. What that means is you must compare conviction with no conviction. If you have a small flame, that small flame can be turned into a conflagration, a raging fire. If you have no small flame, it cannot be changed at all. It cannot be built up. The conviction is like that small flame. With Baba, you have to think this way, and this is my experience. With Baba, your spiritual progress is slow. Without him, it's impossible. You must think that way, because it's actually true. Just compare slow to impossible. You'll get more patience that way. The richness of the moment. You see, everything that we do, the purpose of remembering Baba is, in one fell swoop, to withdraw your mind from its endless worry. Now, as soon as you think about Baba, it doesn't mean that you're going to stop worrying. You have to continue to think about him. And continue, and continue. And when your mind goes off to worrying again, you have to bring it back again. The point I'm trying to make is, there is no other way. You have to remember Baba, because by remembering Baba, it's more likely that your consciousness is going to be brought back from all that whole sea of worrying. And when it's brought back, what happens then is then you begin to appreciate. It's as though you go from one world to another. You begin to appreciate what he stands for. And when you begin to appreciate what he stands for, there is a better chance that you're going to obey him. And by obeying him, I mean simply being more positive, and when a negative thought comes, you have the energy to try to change that negative thought to a positive thought. It is very easy to understand what we must do, but you must start. The result of doing the real Baba work is to enrich your life. Prepared to finding Baba's presence within. Baba is out there, and why is it you admire him? If you see him, you read about him, you find out that he is this exceptional being in this way, he is this exceptional person in that way, in every way that you can think of. Why is it? Why do you admire that? He's not going to give you anything that your limited self wants. You know that. We all know that Baba's the one to take, not the one to give. Well, why does it you admire him? Do you know why you admire him? You are admiring him because that's what you really are. That perfection that you see in him, that seems so unattainable in yourself, is what you really are. And that's why you admire him. That's why you find him irresistible. That's why you have to find a way to remember him constantly. You will never be satisfied with anything else. No matter what it is you could achieve. Great musicianship, great oratory, great scientific accomplishment. All that does is to deceive you. I would say that we've all been all of these things. Would you give up Baba for any one of these things? Great virtuosity. What does it mean? Virtuosity, if it's really virtuosity, what is virtuosity in art? Any art form. It's pointing to God. That's all. The greatest expression in science or art or any activity emanating from human endeavor, if it has eloquence, it's simply pointing to God. And you have him already. You have the clearest, we have the clearest understanding that a limited human being can have, that God in fact exists. I used to hear about these various accounts that Baba would not allow you to bow down to his feet. And I was thinking to myself one time, I feel as though a person must earn the right to bow down to the God-man. And what I think I meant by that, I hate this bouncing back and forth. What I think I meant by that was, I pictured the warrior that goes from lifetime to lifetime. He bears in his mind, his soul, his body, the scars of a struggle to reach something magnificent. And after he's gone through these many battles, that living in illusion is that. But when he's come to the place, when he has begun to see the purpose of life in some form, the greatness of a human being who rises above self, that noble warrior, when he comes to the God-man, he sees what is there to be seen. And he alone has the right to bow down to his feet. Well, this is the quest that all of us must go on. We have the key in our hands. The key is conviction. But you can have that key in your hand and never use it. Or at least not use it for a long, long time. That is a tragic waste. The key must be used every moment. Baba wants us to be happy on the way to him. He wants us to make, you heard the expression, 99% of suffering. 99% of suffering is unnecessary. I understand that to be, we must make 99% of suffering in illusion unnecessary, and make only that remaining 1%. The remaining 1% that is left out is the 1% of suffering that's necessary for God. We put on our own shoulders the suffering that causes our lives to be empty and bleak, causes worry to mount up to monumental proportions. I'll tell you something else from my own experience. Every moment that you do not think of Baba, you are worrying. Every moment that you do not think about Baba, you are vulnerable to the pressures of life. You need to have that absolute armor. That's why the work is so necessary. This is not something that you're out there leaving all pleasure behind. On the contrary, this is a way to gain real pleasure, real serenity of mind. Doing that work, that's why I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled because I see it works. I simply try to find better ways to remember him, better ways to obey him. I sleep very little. The only relief I get during those long nights is to think about him. What we need to do, the reason we have to think about Baba every moment, creation, illusion is a jungle. Baba is that mighty oak tree. We must tie ourselves to that oak tree and give ourselves a very short rein. So when you remember Baba, you don't go too far into that jungle of illusion. That jungle of illusion will make you forget Baba. You'll get drawn into this trap, that trap, one after the other. And it's not an escape, my friends. The way you can deal best with whatever problem you have to deal with is to keep Baba in the front of your mind. Then all those things that you've learned that Baba has taught us, you don't look for results. You do the best you can. You don't react to people. You've got to react to people if you're not remembering Baba. You must. You must be aware of those things you don't like in others if you're not remembering Baba. If you're feeling joyful, and this is the ultimate result of focusing on Baba. If you feel joyful, how can you make somebody else unhappy? You don't. You don't say disagreeable things. Even in a job like mine, where you're giving bad news to people all the time. You say it constructively. You say it tactfully. I thank God that I have that conviction about Baba, because it makes it more possible to do the kinds of things that normally would not be very pleasant to do. You have your own inner source. Your inner source of happiness is self-grounded. Baba simply wants you to focus on him because you can't find him within yourself. So he comes out and makes the most magnificent appearance on the stage of humanity. The life that is so supremely lived, that love unmixed with desire, that peace untroubled by ambition, that power unused except for others, all of these magnificent things that Baba's said to describe the perfect life lived by the perfect man. I am a gauge against which you can measure what you are or where you are, but also what you can become. You know that discourse where he talks about the inferiority complex and the superiority complex. All of these things that Baba said. I once remembered giving a talk out in California, and I was finally relieved to have given the talk and said things that I thought were important to say. And then I found out they wanted me to give another talk. And I was thinking to myself, my God, what else can I say? And I was really concerned about it. So I went back to my room, I picked up the discourses, and I read all about the ego. And after reading all about the ego, I realized that I had nothing to say. There was nothing to say. Everything comes from the ego. And then I realized, after going through that enormous despair, I realized much more fully and powerfully how much we need Baba. So that was my next talk. The point of the matter is that we are, when we are motivated by those concerns which we normally associate with our egotistical selves, our false selves, we are very vulnerable, we are very fragile, we are very subject to being hurt, we're very thin-skinned. So consequently, for our own survival, it is absolutely necessary that we put Baba first. And the only way that you can do that is to remember him, obey him, and surrender to his will. What time am I supposed to be finished somehow? No, 3 minutes. May I read something to you that I think is very, very good? Would you like to hear, or would you rather I not read something?
Read something. It's good.
All right, this was an answer to a request. There's an American who used to be Paul Brunton's secretary many years ago. He wrote me and asked me something about God Speaks, and I wrote him back and I said, I have to think about it. Well, I thought about it, and I said, Dear Louis, the following is a comprehensive answer to your question. It expresses my feeling based upon my conviction that Baba is God, and as God, he is in all, as he stated many times. I hope you do find what I've felt in this. Anything that man interprets is limited to man's understanding. Since God is perfect, he understands completely. Now, in order for man to understand what God interprets for man's level of understanding, God must use man's language. The perfect state of awareness, which is God, cannot be explained in man's terms. It can only be experienced as man's spiritual awareness increases. Man can intellectually interpret God's state of awareness, but man cannot understand, since the intellect must be balanced with love. It is not the mind alone that brings man to God. It is the perfect balance of mind and heart. The reason for creation is to give man the means to balance the mind and heart. Therefore, the birth of duality. Even though duality is not real. But God, beyond duality, had to give himself the first experience in duality. God consciously and unconsciously experienced duality simultaneously. So in practical, intellectual terms, God is and always will be conscious of his own divinity at all times in creation and beyond creation. And beyond creation. So man must try to look beyond language and know there is infinitely more than even God's written words. The written words of God have their purpose. It is to help man keep his mind on God. But the real work is to love God 100%. That is the only way man should interpret any written explanations of perfection, even written by the God-man. Since God experienced creation consciously and unconsciously, he always experiences creation consciously and unconsciously, at all times and on all levels. It is God's conscious awareness of creation that keeps creation alive. Since God is infinite, so creation is infinite. Since God is aware of his own perfect state of awareness, he will always be aware of his own state of awareness. This cannot be explained in man's language. So God gave man something better. God embedded in man the great longing to be reunited with God. This is the unconscious awareness of God in man. Now, since man is the most conscious of all living creatures, and since he will embark on a road of great puzzlement about himself and creation, he will question all that happens to him. This questioning begins the long and tedious journey of the intellect. Now the journey becomes clouded with doubt, which brings forth the three basic negative forces in creation: fear, anger, and hatred. Man's inability to understand creation, Baba calls ignorance. Man's ability to understand creation, Baba calls awareness. Baba likens ignorance to the intellect and awareness to love. So to overcome ignorance, the intellect must be developed to its fullest. And in doing this, awareness transforms the intellect into love. This applies to all except those to whom Baba has given his grace. Those special ones were never satisfied with intellectual explanations. All are unconsciously aware of God at all times. It is the function of the intellect to carry this unconscious awareness of God through evolution and involution to the threshold of the spiritual planes. The threshold, Baba explains, as the spiritual path before the planes. So now you see how important the intellect is. But because it is ignorant, it must carry the burden of its ignorance until it is no longer ignorant. It has a heavy task. Although it has a heavy task, it will have a great reward. The reward is awareness. Even so, the reward is given in very small doses. The intellect continues to exist throughout the remainder of the spiritual journey of the soul, until the soul is no longer aware of itself as separate from God. At this point, the soul experiences everything as God except itself. This means the soul is now at the threshold of the seventh plane. The soul must enter the seventh plane completely aware and completely stripped of all memories of the journey through creation. Now the unconscious God is what it always was: pure consciousness, unchanged consciousness, perfect knowledge, perfect power, and perfect bliss. So the avatar of the age, Meher Baba, tells us that God is in all things at all times, consciously and unconsciously. That God is experiencing himself as every speck of dust in creation, as every pig in creation, as every man in creation. Now at the same time, God is experiencing himself as the conscious God in all. He also experiences himself as the unconscious God, struggling to consciously realize himself as the conscious God he really is. Now you can see why it is impossible to explain God intellectually. So Baba created in all things the driving force of uniting with God. This simply means the conscious God gave, through his divine grace, the unconscious God the ability to love. That is the only way the soul can become one with God consciously. Love is the key. Since love is the only key, the difficulty arises when man tries to understand love. How many times have you heard or read, God is love. What this means is what you assume is God and what you assume is love are two separate things. That God is God, and as God he loves. When in reality, God and love are one and the same. It is the same to say love when referring to God or to say God when referring to love. So if God is love, and love is God, and God is in all, then love is in all. So all is God and all is love. And since nothing exists but God, then nothing exists but love. Now the work is to feel love and to feel God. The more you are aware of God, the more you are aware of love. The more you are aware of God love, the less you are aware of being separate from God love. So when any God man says, think of me, or follow me, I am the way, he is saying, love me, and love the me in all. So Baba tells us, I am the conscious God in all, at all times, and I am the unconscious God in all, at all times. Words are still words, but loving is divine. Thank you for your patience, Jesus.